Everyone, today we're talking about Sodom and a little content warning. There is descriptions of sexual violence. The two angels entered Sodom in the evening, and Lot, who was sitting at the gate of Sodom, saw them, got up to greet them, and bowed low. He said, "Come to your servant's house, spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you can get up early and go on your way." They said, "No, we'll spend the night in the town square." He pleaded earnestly with them, so they went with him and entered his house. He made a big meal for them, even baking unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they went to bed, the men of the city of Sodom, everyone from the youngest to the oldest, surrounded the house and called to Lot, "Where are the men who arrived tonight? Bring them out so that we may know them." Lot went out to the entrance, closed the door behind him, and said, "My brothers, don't do such an evil thing. I've got 2 daughters who are virgins. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do whatever you wish with them. But don't do anything to these men, because they are now under the protection of my roof." They said, "Get out of the way. Does this immigrant want to judge us? We'll treat you worse than them." So Sodom's sin has nothing to do with homosexuality. It's ridiculous to think that there would be a town populated entirely by gay men, as it sounds like if that's the way you read it. There was no concept of sexual orientation in the ancient world that even goes to the time of the New Testament. That is a modern concept that we mistakenly import onto Scripture. Their sin is how they treat strangers. Remember the story about Abraham's hospitality a couple days ago? This is like the opposite. And what is the opposite of hospitality? Well, I think the worst you could go would be attempted gang rape. I read it as no, which is a Hebrew euphemism for sex, but that's not really what they're talking about. If I were translating and willing to get fired, I would use a word that starts with F, that can imply sex and also violence. This is rape as domination, and it's used to dehumanize, and it still happens in prison or in war. There's a lot of patriarchal assumptions that go into this story, that it shames a man to be penetrated, right, to treat them like a woman, or that any man's honor is more important than a woman's, which is why Lot offers his daughters, because he's trying to protect his male guests. When I would say maybe his daughters should be under his protection too. Sodom is judged for how quickly they turn violent towards outsiders. I mean, look at what they do to Lot when he says, "Hey guys, maybe you shouldn't do this." And so I think the most applicable modern parallel would be to imagine a black man visiting a southern town after the Civil War. Right? The crowd at Sodom here is really more like a lynch mob than anything else. So we see here their inhospitality. God has already talked about their injustice. But if we want to see the sin of Sodom spelled out, just go to Ezekiel 16. "This was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty and did abominable things before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it." People talk a lot about this country's moral decline. So if we're going to have that conversation, let's orient ourselves to the proper biblical concerns, shall we?